The night was dark and stormy, with thick clouds obscuring the moon and casting a sinister shadow over the desolate village of Blackwood. The wind howled through the skeletal trees, their bare branches reaching out like skeletal fingers, ready to grasp anyone who dared to wander too close. In a ramshackle old house at the edge of the village, a young woman named Emily was all alone. She had inherited the house from her late grandmother, and though the place was in shambles, she couldn't resist the lure of its history. It was rumored that the house was haunted, but Emily had always been skeptical of such tales. As the night deepened, Emily tried to shake off her unease. She lit a few candles and settled in with a book, hoping to lose herself in its pages. The creaking of the old wooden floors beneath her only added to her unease. The storm outside raged on, and Emily couldn't help but feel a growing sense of dread. Suddenly, a cold draft swept through the room, extinguishing the candles. Emily's heart raced as she fumbled for a flashlight. The darkness was suffocating, and she couldn't shake the feeling that she was not alone. She heard faint whispers in the shadows, as if the very walls of the house were speaking to her. Emily cautiously made her way to the front door, intent on leaving the house and seeking refuge with her neighbors. But when she reached for the doorknob, it wouldn't budge. Panic set in as she realized she was trapped inside. In the flickering candlelight, Emily saw a figure at the end of the hallway. It was a ghostly apparition, a young woman in a tattered white gown. Her eyes were hollow, and her face was twisted in agony. She moved closer to Emily, her ethereal form floating above the floor. "Who are you?" Emily stammered, her voice trembling. The ghostly woman didn't respond with words, but instead, her hand extended towards Emily, and she beckoned her to follow. Emily, overwhelmed with terror, had no choice but to obey. She followed the ghostly figure down a corridor and into a room at the back of the house. Inside the room, Emily's blood ran cold. She was surrounded by dozens of portraits, all depicting the same young woman she had seen in the hallway. The room was filled with a sense of despair and suffering that seemed to seep from the very walls. The ghostly woman pointed to one of the portraits. It was a painting of a family, and the young woman in the portrait was standing with her parents and siblings. Their eyes were filled with sorrow, and the date on the painting indicated that they had all perished in a tragic fire that had consumed the house many years ago. Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as she realized the truth. The ghostly woman was the spirit of the young woman in the portrait, forever trapped in this house, reliving the night of the fire over and over. She had been trying to communicate, to share her tragic story, and to seek some form of release. Emily felt a deep sadness for the trapped spirit and knew she had to help. She began researching the history of the house and discovered that there was a hidden chamber beneath the floor where the family's diaries and mementos were stored. With the guidance of the ghostly woman, Emily unearthed the chamber, and as she placed the family's belongings in the fireplace, she whispered a prayer for their souls. With a blinding flash, the house was filled with warmth and light, and the ghostly woman smiled for the first time. She nodded her thanks to Emily and slowly faded away, finally finding the peace she had longed for. From that night on, Emily's house was no longer haunted, and the village of Blackwood was a little less eerie.